You went through something that should have finished you. I am not talking about common difficulty. I am talking about that specific moment you do not need me to name because you know exactly which one it is. The moment when the ground gave way in a manner that felt definitive. When the extent of what was collapsing was too great for any internal resource of yours to hold. When you looked at what remained and could not see how it could ever become something again. And you are here. Not necessarily on the other side with everything resolved, perhaps still with scars that ache on specific days, perhaps still processing layers of what happened that you have not yet fully reached, but here, standing, present, capable of receiving what this video will deliver to you. And this simple fact, before the end of this video, will gain a weight completely different from what it has now. Because what I am going to show you today is not that you are strong. It is something much more specific than that. I am going to show you that what was used against you was redirected, that the hand that held you in the moments when you no longer had a way to hold yourself alone was neither coincidence nor luck. It was a vigilance that operated with precision while you crossed what you should not have crossed, and even so, you crossed. Stay with me until the end, because the confidence you will build from today onward will not be the emotional confidence that rises and falls with the day. It will be the firm ground of one who looked at the concrete evidence of their own history and recognized what was always there. Before entering into what was happening while you crossed that moment, I need to name what it left behind, because many people carry the consequences of such an experience without having had the space to recognize what it cost. There is a specific form of exhaustion that occurs after you survive something that should have destroyed you. It is not the weariness of defeat. It is something more paradoxical. It is the weariness of having arrived on the other side without a map explaining why you arrived when so many others do not.
Attention, you need to prepare now. I put together an exclusive resource for those who feel set apart for something greater, but live surrounded by noise, distractions, and mental overload. This is a 30-day journey that will transform your life, a guided path to armor your mind and prepare for what's coming, with daily practices of focus, boundaries, and discipline. Stop negotiating with the noise. Learn to spot distractions before they control you and strengthen your mind. Also available in an immersive audio version. Over 10,000 readers have already transformed their lives through the 30-day journey. Thousands of people have already started this transformation. People like you, who were tired of living in the fog. Ordinary people who decided to stop accepting mental chaos. Take advantage of this limited time offer only this month. Access your link just below in the pinned comment.
It is the confusion of not knowing what to do with a life that was preserved to a degree you still cannot fully quantify. It is the question that few verbalize aloud because it seems ungrateful. Why did I go through this? Why did I go? This question is not a lack of faith. It is the sign that you are someone who needs meaning, not just survival. That a life that was preserved but not understood does not yet have the stability it should have. That what happened to you demands a reading that goes beyond "thank God it passed," because you feel that what passed left something in you that has not yet been fully integrated. Researchers from UFRJ, in studies on post-traumatic growth in Brazilian adults who went through severe rupture experiences, significant financial loss, dissolution of long-term relationships, serious illnesses, deep family crises, identified that the variable that most distinguished those who emerged strengthened from those who emerged merely as survivors was not the intensity of the trauma nor the material resources available during the crisis. It was the capacity to construct what the researchers called a narrative of meaning, a reading of the experience that connects what happened to a trajectory with direction, not an explanation that justifies the suffering, but an interpretation that finds in it something that points beyond it. The question, why did I go through this, is not a problem to be eliminated. It is the engine of the deepest transformation that exists. And today, you will have material to begin answering it in a way that is both intellectually honest and spiritually real. If you are not yet subscribed to this channel, subscribe now. Because what we are building here is not isolated content, it is a progressive reading of who you are and how your story makes sense. And you will need to be present for every layer of this process. There is a Hebrew word that is at the heart of the best-known verse about the reversal of destiny in the entire Bible. The verse is Genesis 50:20, where Joseph says to the brothers who sold him as a slave decades earlier, "You planned evil against me, but God planned it for good." The word is chashav, in Hebrew hashab. And what makes this verse extraordinary is not just its content, it is its structure. The word chashav appears twice in the same sentence, with the same implicit subject being different. You chashav evil, God chashav for good. The same verb, the same action of planning, weaving, calculating, projecting, the same strategic intelligence applied to the same set of events with diametrically opposite results. Hebrew lexicographers describe chashav as the verb of the craftsman who works with intention, the weaver who elaborates a pattern, the architect who designs a structure, the strategist who anticipates every move. It is not the vague planning of someone who has a general idea. It is the precise planning of someone who knows exactly what they are building and how each element fits into the final result. And what the text of Genesis reveals by using the same verb for both agents is that God did not merely respond to what Joseph's brothers did. He worked with the same material, with the same precision, for a purpose that the brothers had no way of seeing while they executed their plan. What was used against you did not have the final word on what it became. The same chashav that operated in Joseph's story operated in yours. And to fully understand what this means, you need to know the whole story, not just the final verse. Joseph was 17 years old when his brothers threw him into a cistern and sold him to Ishmaelite merchants for 20 pieces of silver. The pretext was the colorful robe, the sign of the father's favoritism, the symbol of a distinction the brothers could not endure. But beneath the pretext was something deeper, Joseph's dreams. He had dreamed that his brothers would bow down before him, and he had made the mistake of telling them. The vision of what he was called to be ignited in them, what envy always kindles when it encounters potential that cannot be controlled. So he went to Egypt as a slave. He served in Potiphar's house and built trust and authority within the limits of what was given to him, until Potiphar's wife falsely accused him of something he did not do, and he was imprisoned. Think of the extent of what was happening to Joseph's life at this point. He was betrayed by his family, sold, enslaved in a foreign country, falsely accused by someone he had treated with integrity, imprisoned by a lying accusation from which he had no way to defend himself. If you were to read this sequence without knowing the end, the only reasonable conclusion would be, this life is being systematically dismantled. And inside the prison, the place where any external reading would say Joseph's purpose had been definitively interrupted, he interpreted dreams. First for the Pharaoh's cupbearer and the baker. The cupbearer was restored and promised to mention Joseph to Pharaoh, and he forgot. For 2 years. 2 years of waiting inside a prison after having done something that had opened a door. The door did not open, and the silence that followed was not abandonment. It was preparation for a timing that Joseph had no way of calculating from the outside. There is a Hebrew word that appears in the Psalms repeatedly to describe God's relationship with those under his protection, and it is more specific than what the translation guard or protect captures. The word is shamar, in Hebrew, shamar. Lexicographers describe shamar as the active and uninterrupted vigilance of a sentry, not a passive shield that merely blocks what comes from outside, but a continuous attention that accompanies every movement of what is being protected. Psalm 121 uses shamar 6 times in 8 verses. The Lord is your keeper. He who keeps you will not slumber. Not occasional protection, permanent vigilance even in the moments when the protected one does not perceive it. Joseph was under shamar in prison. He was under shamar when the cupbearer forgot. He was under shamar during the 2 years of silence. The absence of evidence of protection was not the absence of protection. It was the operation of a timing that needed those 2 years so that the right moment would arrive with the necessary exactitude. And when Pharaoh had the dreams that none of his wise men could interpret, the cupbearer remembered Joseph. And in 24 hours, Joseph left the prison and became the second highest authority in the most powerful Egypt of the ancient world. What was planned to interrupt Joseph's purpose was the path by which Joseph's purpose arrived. Research from Endeavor, Brazil, an organization that tracks the trajectories of entrepreneurs and leaders throughout the national territory, published data revealing something that contradicts the narrative that success is a straight ascending line. Among the Brazilian founders and leaders who built organizations of significant impact, more than 70% reported having gone through at least one severe rupture experience. Bankruptcy, unexpected dismissal, health crisis, dissolution of partnership, which at the moment it occurred seemed to definitively end what was being built. And the pattern that emerges from the trajectories of this group is not that they found shortcuts to bypass the collapse. It is that the collapse, in most cases, was the moment of rupture that redirected towards something that would not have been reached by the original path. What was being destroyed was not the purpose. It was the path that was not the right one for the purpose. Researchers from PureCreo, in studies on the construction of meaning after adversity, identified that adults who developed what they called a providential reading of their own history, not naive, not minimizing suffering, but capable of identifying connections between what was lost and what was built from the loss, presented significantly higher levels of prospective resilience, not just the capacity to endure what has already passed, but the capacity to cross future crises with more firmness, because they already possess concrete evidence that what tries to interrupt them does not have the final word. Like this video now. It is not just a number, it is the sign that this type of reading has value for you and that you want to continue building upon it. But now I need to show you something that goes beyond Joseph, because there is an element in your story that Joseph's story does not fully cover. Esther was a young Jewish woman who had lost her parents and been raised by her cousin Mordecai in the Babylonian exile. She had no position, no power, no resource that made her an obvious candidate for what was to come. When she was taken to the palace of King Ahasuerus, in a selection process she did not choose, what seemed to be happening was an absorption, a young woman without protection being swallowed by a power system that did not care who she was. And then Haman's edict was promulgated, the extermination of all Jews in the empire. And Mordecai reached Esther with a phrase that is among the most precise that exist regarding the purpose revealed through circumstances that seemed contrary. Who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Notice the structure of the question. Mordecai does not assert. He asks. He opens the possibility, and by opening it, invites Esther to make the reading of her own history that she had not yet made, that what seemed to be her absorption by a power system was in truth her strategic positioning for a moment that demanded exactly where she was. What seemed to swallow you may be what positioned you. Esther asked the Jews to fast for her for 3 days, and then she entered the king's presence, which without an invitation was punished by death and saved her people. The circumstance that most threatened her became the platform for her greatest act. In the comments below, write the word preserved, not just as gratitude for the past, as a declaration about the future. Preserved is the recognition that the hand that held you before is still here. Write it and notice what moves within you as you write. There is a third character who needs to enter this video, and he is less dramatic than Joseph and Esther, but perhaps the closest to the experience most of you are living. Nehemiah was cupbearer to King Artaxerxes. He had a position of trust, a stable life in exile, and when he received the news that Jerusalem was in ruins and its walls destroyed, something broke inside him. He wept, he fasted, he prayed for days, and then he asked the king for permission to go rebuild what was destroyed. What happened when he arrived in Jerusalem and began the work should be taught in every context of reconstruction, because it is exactly what happens when you begin to rebuild yourself after a rupture. Those who opposed the purpose appeared immediately. Sanballat and Tobiah ridiculed the work. They conspired to interrupt it. They tried to intimidate Nehemiah with repeated threats, and Nehemiah's response was one of the most sober and practical that the scriptures record. He did not enter into debate with the opponents. He did not stop to respond to the criticisms. He said, "The work is great and extensive, and we are separated far from one another on the wall. In whatever place you hear the sound of the trumpet, rally to us there." And he continued working. But there is something Nehemiah did that is rarely highlighted. At the same time that half of the workers were building, the other half stood guard, with spears, shields, and bows. He understood that rebuilding in a reality where there is opposition requires simultaneity. You work and you remain vigilant at the same time. Not because fear should paralyze, but because strategic intelligence does not ignore the real context. And the walls of Jerusalem were rebuilt in 52 days. A project that the opponents thought impossible was concluded in a time that Nehemiah's own enemies recognized as the work of God, because the speed of what was done had no purely human explanation. What is being rebuilt in you, confidence, the sense of identity, clarity of purpose, will face opposition, not because you are doing something wrong, because you are doing exactly what needs to be done. Opposition confirms the importance of the work, not its infeasibility. Now I need to give you the concept that unites all of this, and that will change the way you read not only the past, but what is ahead of you. In the first chapter of Ephesians, verse 10, Paul uses a Greek word that appears rarely in the New Testament, and that describes something few texts of any tradition manage to articulate with this precision. The word is anakephalaio, in Greek, anakephaleo. Translators generally render it as to recapitulate, or to gather together in Christ all things. But the image the Greek carries is more specific. It comes from kephale, head, and the prefix ana indicates a movement of bringing back up, of gathering under a single point of convergence what was dispersed, fragmented, without apparent connection to each other. The anakephalaio of God is the process by which all the apparently disconnected elements of your story, the losses, the redirections, the doors that closed, the seasons of waiting that made no sense, the relationships that ended sooner than you wanted, the opportunities that did not materialize, are gathered under a single purpose that organizes them retroactively. It is not that God approved of everything that happened to you. It is that He possesses the capacity to work with the material of a story that includes betrayal, loss, and rupture, exactly as He did with Joseph, with Esther, with Nehemiah, and lead it to a point of convergence that none of the isolated circumstances read in isolation would allow one to foresee. The clarity you are beginning to feel about who you are and where you are going is not an emotional illusion that will disappear when circumstances become difficult again. It is the product of an anakephalaio in progress, the process of reunification of a story that, for a long time, seemed only a collection of fragments without internal logic. Activate the notification bell now. In the next video, we will enter into something that directly complements what you received today. How this clarity about your story translates into concrete action, what you stop doing and what you start, based on the awareness of who you truly are. Do not be left out. Do not. Now, what this understanding changes in practice. The first thing that changes is your relationship with the past. You stop carrying the fragments of rupture as evidence of defect and begin carrying them as construction material. Not because the pain they caused was insignificant, but because the chashav of God worked with that material with the same precision with which He worked with the betrayal of Joseph's brothers, with Esther's exile, with the ruins of Jerusalem. The second thing that changes is your relationship with present opposition. When you understand that what tried to destroy you failed not by chance but by shamar, by an active vigilance that operated even when you did not perceive it, the opposition you face now does not have the paralyzing power it had before. You are not naive about it. You simply have concrete evidence that it does not have the final word. The third thing that changes is your relationship with the future. The confidence emerging in you now does not need to be sustained by favorable circumstances, because it is not founded on circumstances. It is founded on the concrete and verifiable fact that you went through what you went through and what tried to interrupt you failed. This is a permanent datum of your history. No future circumstance can erase it. Researchers from Pyork Rio call this evidence-based resilience, different from aspirational resilience, which depends on hope about the future. Evidence-based resilience is anchored in what has already happened, in the concrete record that you crossed what should have destroyed you, and it did not destroy you. This foundation does not oscillate with the mood of the day or with the intensity of the present challenge. It remains available because it is historical, not emotional. Joseph reached the end of the story we all know. His brothers bowed before him, exactly as the dreams had shown decades earlier. But the text records something that happens before the revelation. Joseph wept, not out of anger, not out of triumph. He turned away and wept, because the weight of what it had cost to get there and the weight of what had been preserved were too great to fit into any other expression. You have a right to that emotion, to the recognition that what you crossed cost you, that the scars are real, that the nights of solitude were not imaginary, that the confusion was genuine. You do not need to diminish the cost of what passed to be able to recognize that what passed did not have the final word. Esther entered the king's presence trembling. The text does not say she was not afraid. It says she went anyway. The courage that emerges after a season of preservation is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to act based on the awareness that what keeps you is greater than what threatens you. And Nehemiah continued building with one hand on the trowel and the other on the spear. Reconstruction did not demand the absence of threat. It demanded simultaneity, working and remaining vigilant at the same time, without letting either nullify the other. You went through something that was designed to finish you. It did not finish you. And this is not a motivational statement. It is a verifiable fact that you can touch, that you can reread in your own history, that you can use as firm ground in the next moments when the tremor appears. The shamar did not go away. The chashav that reorients what is used against you has not ended the contract, and the anakephalayu, the reunification of all the fragments of your story under a single purpose, is not complete yet. It is in progress, and you are the only one who has a privileged position to see what is being built from the inside. This is the firm ground, not the absence of future tremors, but the certainty that what sustained you in the greater tremor is still here, now, while you watch this video. If this reached where it needed to reach, share it with someone who is in the middle of a season that seems to have no exit. You do not need to explain the context. You do not need to justify sending it. Just place this video in the hands of someone you know is trying to find meaning in what they are crossing. Sometimes the preservation of a life arrives through the hands of someone who was also preserved. We will see each other in the next video.
Attention, you need to prepare now. I put together an exclusive resource for those who feel set apart for something greater, but live surrounded by noise, distractions, and mental overload. This is a 30-day journey that will transform your life, a guided path to armor your mind and prepare for what's coming, with daily practices of focus, boundaries, and discipline. Stop negotiating with the noise. Learn to spot distractions before they control you and strengthen your mind. Also available in an immersive audio version. Over 10,000 readers have already transformed their lives through the 30-day journey. Thousands of people have already started this transformation. People like you who were tired of living in the fog, ordinary people who decided to stop accepting mental chaos. Take advantage of this limited time offer only this month. Access your link just below in the pinned comment.